Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we are going to be talking about Mojo and basically content creator program videos how come out for this character, as well as some more kind of like reviews and impressions on Twitter, which is exactly where I am getting this wonderful spreadsheet from, with pros and cons. Now this spreadsheet has been made by Cam. He's also the host of Podcast of Champions, a very good podcast, in my opinion, probably the most useful podcast out there related to Marvel Contest of Champions. And he basically is a part of content creator program as well, but rather than uploading CCP videos, he typically kind of like puts it in spreadsheet and posts on Twitter and then discusses it. And this is where we got this wonderful spreadsheet from. I'm gonna leave a link to his YouTube channel as well, where you can catch his podcasts as and when he uploads them. But meanwhile, let's discuss the pros and cons of this champion, because once again, typically like for pretty much every single champion that has come out, there have been some god tier degen titles or whatever basically, but let's discuss whether he is in fact god tier, practical or impractical, or what his gonna be most notable uses, I guess. And so we're gonna start with pros. And as a process, potential to have a high damage per hit given the right conditions. Damage per hit basically is your overall kind of damage output. You can measure damage per hit or damage per second. Typically, I personally like to measure the DPS, that is damage per second, because the time is only kind of like constant important value as far as I'm concerned while I'm playing this game. I really typically do not care whether I land 10 or 50 hits in the same amount of time. I do care how quickly I finish this fights. That being said, he has a potential for extremely high damage output once he's ramped up, and if he has the right synergy with him. And he also has quite a bit of sustainability with him, but we're gonna get to it later. So majority of damage comes from passive degen, which very few champions can mitigate, and that is actually pretty much the perfect way how you want to deliver your damage in general, because this game has a lot of nodes that put a damage cap. Even Labyrinth, Abyss of Legends have 50 or 85k damage cap, so that kind of puts Proxima and Sunspot and a couple other champions out of the contention. Then you have a lot of nodes like Safeguard or Rage or Bulwark in AEW, so on and so forth. So there is a lot of kind of like damage caps in game, and obviously then your obvious kind of like best way to deliver damage quite often is through damage over time effects, but there are pretty much immunities everywhere, right? If you have incinerate damage, there's going to be a group of champions you can damage. If you have bleed damage, there's a large group of champions you can damage with that, and you lose out. But passive degeneration is pretty much universally the best way to dish out your damage over time effects, because nothing in this game is fully immune to passive degen. Only kind of like apostrophe there could be Gladiator Hulk, which obviously could trigger the face me ability, but outside of Gladiator Hulk, which is one champion which is not that present in metagame, that passive degen will inflict its damage pretty much on any other champion. So I think that is quite important thing to take away here, because nothing is going to be immune to that, and that is quite useful. So effective at dealing buffs with timers on them, granted you can reliably complete prompts. Now here again is kind of like that apostrophe, because Mojo does not have very good nullification game in itself. However, he does reduce the buff duration by 90% when his death field is active. Therefore, I think that's a major weakness for the character. The fact that level 1, if you choose to use level 1, you sacrifice a lot of your damage, because you need to use pretty much different rotation in order to be nullifying some permanent buffs, and you do not want to do that. That does not flow kind of generically in Mojo's playstyle, where you want to use level 2s and level 3s only, mainly level 2s. And that is kind of unfortunate, because there are more and more buffs that Mojo will not be able to deal with. Let's say Rage node, even though he can bypass the Rage damage cap, you will not be able to get rid of the Furies outside of using level 1, therefore you'll be forced to play differently. Same goes for resistor nodes, you're not going to be able to bypass that. And a whole large subset of champions or nodes basically run on permanent buffs, and that is something Mojo is going to be weak against, and that is, in my opinion, arguably one of the bigger kind of like setbacks for the character, because plenty enough matchups, you don't get opponents with a lot of buffs, and now you are digging there even deeper and cutting a huge slice out of the matchups with buffs, where Mojo actively works actually, and where he kind of like contends with buffs that have a timer and are not permanent. So that bit I definitely do not really like. Ability to place buffs on the enemy so does not rely on them having built-in buffs. Now that is perfect. The fact that you have those hater counters is great. It's kind of like Voodoo, where Voodoo can trigger all of his abilities against opponents that do not generically buff, but at the same time he gets better time if opponents do buff. So take a look at this to be kind of like Voodoo or Man-Thing situation, where you have your own buffs, you having a much better time if opponents bring their own as well, because then your abilities are kind of amplified, but you can trigger all of your abilities without them having generically buffs that expire. Some healing and sustain given the large health pool, that is definitely useful. Defensive potential, basically unavoidable degen that scales with the attack boost on nodes, very large health pool, top 5 in game. Regen that also scales with health pool, health boost from nodes, and tagged as villain, control, and metal to benefit from 3 out of 5 defensive tactics. And I think that is going to be one key aspect here. Huge health pool, benefits from all defensive tactics. His degen is unavoidable, so I think he is effectively going to be pain in the bottom on defense. Obviously, he will have his counters. Every champion at this point in game does have very good counters, but he's also going to be one of those champions that you do have to bring in specific counters, and that will get you and will force you to use potions. Imagine him with Siphon and all the degen happening, huge block damage, him regenerating, and it's not going to be a pleasant time overall, especially because quite often you cannot escape but to complete a prompt as well, just as you're playing normally. So that is going to be a tricky situation for defense, definitely. MD is useful for him, but also somewhat suicide friendly thanks to the regen. So that is a really good upside, because he does not necessarily need the Mystic Dispersion, in my opinion. Obviously it does help him to get his level 2s quicker, but he also can hang in with Suicide Mastery setup. So all in all, he's a champion that's relatively easy to be thrown in a team. Whatever mastery setup you use, you can kind of roll with it, because typically, at least for me personally, if I'm running Suicides, I'm not running Mystic Dispersion, or if I'm running Mystic Dispersion, I'm not running Suicides, but he's a champion that can just jump in there and still perform, so that's good. But now let's talk about the bigger cons here, and that would be the prompt system is a mess. It's a lot in a lot of higher level matchups when you're concerned about fighting challenging defenders with complicated nodes. Having to pay attention to your prompts will get you wrecked. You can also be instructed to stun versus stun immune, or hold block versus enemy with the oscillate while he's steering through your block, or stand idle versus an aggro AI. I feel offensively the prompt system will prevent Mojo from shining in fights that actually require paying attention. And now this inevitably will end up being a problem, just as he mentioned, because some of the prompts you will be unable to complete, whether it is because you might be asked to stun immune opponent, and then only way how you can complete that prompt is getting stun yourself, which is something you obviously do not want to do. Now you do have a chance, however, to reset that prompt with your heavy attack, and that is a very important thing to note, and that will help in many kind of like harder situations. But again, even though Grant made a really good video about the prompt system, where many prompts kind of complete themselves generically, just like playing the game normally, like dash back, block a hit, dodge a hit, launch a special attack, so on and so forth. But there will be a lot of prompts that are very troublesome to complete. As a perfect example would be, for instance, if you're bringing in Mojo, let's say against Iron Man Infinity War, and you get a prompt to punish a special attack. Now, you cannot do that with Iron Man Infinity War, simply because there is not big enough window for pretty much any champion to punish Iron Man Infinity War special attack. So only way you can complete that prompt is if you purposely shoot your special attack in Iron Man Infinity War's block and get hit in the face, which obviously in a kind of like relatively high level gameplay will get you KO'd. So there will be some frustration, definitely, and that will make this character feel relatively RNG based, because whenever you will go in more difficult of a fight, you will potentially face prompts that are absolutely impossible to be completed and face huge consequences for that. Now, that being said, I also don't think those situations statistically will occur that often. And I think for kind of like more generic content, he definitely will not feel as hard to play. Keeping in mind, again, Brian Grant's video saying that many of these prompts will be fulfilled no matter what. The problem is that each prompt you do not fulfill loses you 5k subscribers and followers or whatever. So that is a huge penalty. That's like 5 completed ones are cancelled by 1 that you fail. So there you have to play with your heavy attacks, and that will make it difficult. And it will be tricky to kind of like pull it off all times at all, like consistently. So that is definitely something that can fully only be comprehended with actually playtesting the champion. Unfortunately, also so far from CCP program, we have pretty much only seen fights against Winter Soldier or full Realm of Legends run or fight against Wolverine and Best. So we haven't seen any uncollected or any Act 6 gameplay or anything like that. Now I do understand that he's given as a rank 3 5-star character only, but still at the same point, it would be nice to be able to see how he performs in actual gameplay, and Cam didn't seem to be too impressed. Again, completing more than 5 prompts have no extra benefit other than reactivating your anti-life field, but failing to complete prompts past 5 can have a massive penalty and very quickly set you back to 1 charge, causing you to lose basically all your damage. Now that will be a big problem, especially if it happens at a time where, as he mentioned before, you are in difficult fights where some of these prompts will be almost impossible to complete. So again, there's going to be that slight RNG aspect always, and he's not going to have that sense of reliability. Like, for instance, when you bring in a Ghost or Omega Red or Quake in a matchup, you know exactly how that's going to play out or what your game plan is, and there's very little that can hinder that outside of your own mistakes. But in here, you're going to have a sense that you're going to be playing more or less with Massacre or some other champion, where what you do and how well you perform can heavily rely on opponent's AI. For instance, I absolutely love playing Massacre. I'm not the greatest Massacre player, but still sometimes AI gets tricky. He doesn't want to hold the block, so I cannot get my bat ignited for really long in the fight, and I end up making a mistake. Now, again, sometimes my fight goes perfectly smooth, and vast majority of the times it does happen. So, but still, that margin of error, that potential kind of like reliance on good or bad luck is very off-putting when you are considering to use a character offensively. Okay, so next one. Heavily relies on his max sig to scale up his damage, and his dupe carry over followers from fight to fight. You need 4 fights where you're finishing with fights more followers than you started with to make sure you won't fall back under 5 charges and lose all your built-in up due to not completing a prompt. So this basic point is, yes, you need a high signature ability, and that also doesn't bode well for characters typically, because unless a champion receives absolutely groundbreaking standing reviews from contest creator program, or there's some incredibly insane footage floating around of a champion relatively early once it gets released, people tend to be underwhelmed and people tend to move on from these champions, and they do not really want to invest. Like, good examples for that would probably be Night Rusher, for instance. Night Rusher is again a champion that can deliver extremely high amount of damage, but needs Sig 200 to do that. Since he didn't get declared to be God tier or something of the sort in his initial reviews upon release, many people just kind of scrolled past him until to this day don't really know what he's about or don't value him too highly. Similar examples would be Elza Bloodstone and a bunch more. So that is always a relatively bad thing if character relies to be pretty much maxed out. And that is quite unfortunate, and nothing I can say in this video will kind of like change that bit of public's perception, because when you're going to pull Mojo for the first time and when you're going to take him to rank 3 as an unduped 5-star, if he's not going to have high signature ability, he's going to be missing a lot of damage, and he's not going to be performing the way he's intended to, because he's intended to be run with max signature ability. So even after you watch this video or next video or see how good Mojo can be, you're going to have your rank 3 unduped 5-star Mojo and you're just going to scroll past him because he is not going to be impressive. And at that point, you're still not going to be willing to use your Awakening Gem and all of your signature stones to bring Mojo back up, obviously, as well as a 6-star. If you do manage to pull him from Koala Crystals, you're not going to be as impressed with your pull. So that is generically a fairly unfortunate thing, and only characters who can kind of get away with that are the ones that are insanely high up top and do something incredible, like Omega Red, like Neymar, so on and so forth. So people believe the hype and do make the investment because they work. Now with Mojo, where it's going to be much more kind of split in between 50-50 or whatever, people who like him, don't like him, who find him valuable, who don't find him valuable, that might be the final nail in the coffin to make sure that this character is not overly popular with majority of the player base, just the fact that he needs to have that high signature ability for the max damage output. So that is definitely unfortunate in my opinion, and is something Kabam should learn from and move away from that, I guess. Very low base block proficiency, crit rate and critical damage, and negative physical resistance on top, all of that. You have a lot of health to play around with, but you will also take a ton of block damage. And this is, again, another major problem, because larger champions in general in this game typically seem to have very bad base stats by crit rate and especially block proficiency. So even if it's not that big of a deal in some occasions, the fact itself that you will visibly see your health bar being chipped down quicker than you anticipate and see these big numbers on your block will again discourage you from playing this champion, and in all reality does make it a lot less viable. Just the idea itself that getting hit on a block will hurt, and will hurt a lot, and especially with chaotic playstyle that Mojo has, it will not be easy to fall in love with this character, because when you get prompts like hold the block for 1.5 seconds, you are quite likely to eat some block damage. And again, these situations just do not do him any favors. So underwhelming stats is, in my opinion, yet another thing that's going to make sure that Mojo is not a fan favorite or a popular character all around in like the endgame. And again, so let's move on. Weak against permanent buffs, with only having the special one to nullify them at one at a time, and also the buff duration reduced for non-permanent buffs is not as potent as stagger or nullify effects, as some stronger buffs will still mess you up, like unstoppable, unblockable, very strong region buffs. And that is also unfortunately true, because his nullify game is arguably one of the weakest ones from all Mystic champions that we have seen recently. Because Mystic Champions typically has one of the two things majorly going for them. It's either great power control or great buff control. And vast majority of the Mystic characters have a bit of both, or at least have one very kind of like prominent. Like Magic has buff control on level 1 and level 3, power control on level 2, and it's insane power control. So Doom has power control on level 1 and his light hits if Aura is active, and a whole bunch of buff control with his nullifies and staggers. Black Widow Clairvoyant, same thing, she has power control on level 2 and buff control based on her charges, and level 2 again. And Symbiote Supreme, great buff control, not that great of a power control, and so on and so forth. So unfortunately Mojo does not really seem to have any power control whatsoever, and also subpar buff control, because making the buffs expire quickly is and can be useful, but the fact that they still trigger, they still activate, still can mess you up, and there's a large group of buffs that just don't expire by themselves, do knock this guy down quite a bit in my eyes, in my opinion. And again, someone relies on Modic's energy to deal great damage per hit, but even this damage per second is lower than a lot of top other options. And there we go. So basically what he's saying is that he's synergy reliant to gain the max damage, and even the max damage does not really compete that well with the strongest damage dealing champions. Right, now all of that being said, the pluses and the minuses, I do personally believe that Mojo will end up somewhere in kind of like good, great defender, but relatively blase for attack. Similar kind of like valuation, probably like an Invisible Woman, which is a completely different champion, but again, offensively, she does not have the greatest amount of utility. Neither does Mojo, because his buff control is subpar. He has no power control, he has no immunities, he doesn't have anything overly special that he does outside of damage. And that's about it, right? So when it comes to valuing these champions, you need to think where, how, and you can use them and you should use them, and how many better alternatives there are. And unfortunately, outside of the unique aspect that you have very controlled and potent degen that's passive, that can deliver damage basically under pretty much any and all conditions, so long as you do not get these prompts that you keep failing. You have very versatile damage dealing champion, but low block proficiency, very low utility, and reliance on these prompts to kind of like be RNG friendly, I think will definitely relegate Mojo when it comes to offensive use to something that might not be garbage, but it's definitely not going to be very popular. Like Modok, for instance. Modok can have a decent damage output. He's level 1, can do like a lot of interesting tricks with strike back and a few other bits. And he actually has on level 1 quite potent power control, also reversal. If you time it well, you can do a lot of interesting things with Modok, but nobody wants to play that character because there are no immunities, there are very little kind of benefits or offensive utility, and even if he can do something interesting, there are always kind of like better options. Like Modok's level 1 can reverse heal, but you'd much rather use Void or Captain America Infinity War, right? Modok's heavy attacks can incinerate, but if you're looking for a champion that does incinerate, you're going to be looking at different direction, like I don't know, Sunspot, Human Torch, or even Night Rusher for all I care, because that incinerate is there, but there are better options for anything Modok can do pretty much. And I think Mojo is going to suffer from the same thing, and that combined with the fact that he needs super high signature ability for accessing the best damage output he can push out, will mean that Mojo is going to be an offensive dud. Even though I think he has definitely some potential, I do not think we're going to see a lot of him being used offensively in like Act 6 clearing, so on and so forth. There will always be some footage floating around somewhere where people are going to say, look, he can do that. But the real question is how many champions can do that same thing, same fight better. And I think Mojo pretty much doesn't have in that department. He doesn't have anything outstandingly unique about him, like for instance Longshot did. And defensively, I think he's going to be a pain. I think he's going to be one of the defensive kind of powerhouses, perhaps similar to Annihilus. Like Annihilus can be countered and can be dealt with relatively easily, but he's still extremely annoying because how often he just gets to people and how awkward he is to face. And Mojo will be one of those champions because he's going to take you out of your comfort zone. You're going to be trying to fail the prompt, so you're going to start having jerky gameplay, and it's going to be difficult to focus. There's going to be a lot of things happening in the fight, and bippity boppity boo, you're going to end up getting wrecked somewhere. So I definitely do think that Mojo is going to be extremely potent defender. Maybe not at the very, very top after a month or two once people get used to it, but definitely in kind of like tiers 3 and below, he's going to be an absolute nightmare for players to deal with. And that pretty much will conclude kind of like my initial impressions about Mojo after we have been watching all of these bits. So here he also demonstrates that Mojo can deal with Wolverine. We have seen that clip on YouTube as well, I believe, and that is cool. Like, that shows that it can be useful somewhere, but again, there are better options for Wolverine, and there's not going to be pretty much any matchup, I think, that I can come out from the top of my head where Mojo is going to be best at or best for. And he also says, overall, I feel Mojo is mostly going to reside on Alliance or defense. Tried using him in some real content, including Act 6, 5, and Uncollected, but the block damage taken combined with the constant need to complete inconvenient prompts always led to one outcome: quitting. Unfortunately, it does seem that he's going to be relatively overwhelming and definitely not going to be a shining star in this month's release. He's going to take backseat to the Longshot when it comes to champion excitement. And that is pretty much my final thought at this point. Mojo, probably going to be a great defender. Extremely unlikely that he's going to be very useful offensively. Not to say that he's not going to have any uses, but there's probably going to be always a better option for anything. And yeah, that will pretty much do for today's video. Sorry guys to keep you so long. if you stayed this far and you want to leave a comment with what you think is going to happen with Mojo and how he's going to turn out to be as a character, you can definitely leave a comment saying #MojoHype and let me know what you think. All that being said, that will do for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, hit that like button, sub button, all the buttons, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya!